When Amina's fingers cracked and bled from the soap, the women laughed. When she collapsed from hunger beside the river, the men looked away and kept walking.
You are too close to the table.
The women of Obiagu had one rule: never let the washing girl sit at the table, never let her wear clean clothes, never let her believe she was equal to their children. Amina was only 10 years old. She had no mother, no father, no family name, and no voice in a village that had decided she was nothing the day she was born. Then one afternoon, a black SUV with government plates rolled slowly into the village, and everything those people believed about that little girl began to fall apart. 10 years ago, during the heaviest rains Obiagu had seen in a decade, a young pregnant woman stumbled into the village from the main road. She was alone, drenched, exhausted, and barely able to stand. Her wrapper was soaked through, and her belly was enormous. Nobody in the village knew her name. Nobody asked where she came from or who the father of her child was. A few women helped her to the small clinic at the edge of the market, not out of kindness, but out of curiosity. That same night, the woman gave birth to a baby girl. The delivery was difficult, and the clinic had no proper doctor, only a midwife who did what she could. But the woman bled too much. By the time the rooster crowed the next morning, the mother was gone. And the baby, tiny, hungry, and alone, was crying in a basket with nobody in the world to hold her. That baby was Amina. Mama Chinyera was the first person who stepped forward. She told the village elders she would take the child and raise her as one of her own. People praised her in the market. They said God had given her a kind heart. The pastor mentioned her generosity in church the following Sunday. But Mama Chinyere did not take that baby because she cared about an orphan. She took that baby because she saw something nobody else saw: an opportunity. A child with no parents, no family, no one to ask questions. From the very moment Amina could walk, Mama Chinyere put her to work. She made her sweep the entire compound before the sun came up. She made her carry water from the well 3 times every morning while her own 2 children, Zainab and Emeka, slept peacefully in their beds. Amina was not given a bed. She slept on a thin mat on the floor of the storage room behind the kitchen. And by the time Amina turned 7, Mama Chinyere had started something that would define the girl's entire life. She began sending Amina to collect dirty laundry from every household in Obiagu, turning her into the village's personal washing girl. The system was simple and cruel. Every morning before dawn, Amina would walk barefoot from house to house, carrying a large metal basin on her head. The women of the village would throw their dirty wrappers, shirts, trousers, and bed sheets into the basin without even glancing at her face. Some tossed the clothes on the ground just to watch her bend down and pick them up. Others cursed at her if she arrived 1 minute late. One woman used to spit near Amina's feet every time she came to collect. When the basin was full and heavy enough to make her neck ache, Amina would carry it to the river, kneel on the wet rocks, and scrub every piece of fabric until the skin on her fingers peeled and her hands burned from the harsh soap. She did this every single day, rain or sun, sick or healthy. She never went to school. She never played with other children. She never celebrated her birthday because nobody even knew the date she was born. And in all those years, not one person in that village ever looked at her and said, "Thank you." But the worst of it did not come from the village women. The worst of it came from inside her own house. Zainab, Mama Chinyere's oldest daughter, was 15 years old, and she treated Amina like something less than a dog. One afternoon, Amina had spent 5 long hours at the river, washing a pile of clothes that included Zainab's white Sunday church dress. She scrubbed it carefully, rinsed it 3 times in the clean part of the stream, and laid it out to dry on the flattest rock she could find. When she brought it home that evening, clean and folded, Zainab took one look at it, smiled a slow, cruel smile, and then deliberately dragged the dress through the red mud behind the compound. She dropped the ruined dress at Amina's feet and said 2 words, "Wash it again." When Amina's eyes filled with tears, Zainab slapped her hard across the face and said, "Orphans do not cry in this house. You are not one of us, and you never will be." The other children in the compound stood there watching, and not a single one of them opened their mouth. But then, something small changed in Obiagu. A new teacher was posted to the village primary school. His name was Mr. Okoro, a tall, quiet man with gentle eyes who had come from Enugu. He was not the kind of man who spoke loudly or tried to impress people. He kept to himself, did his work, and treated everyone with respect. One early morning, while walking the path to the school, Mr. Okoro passed the river and saw a small girl kneeling on the rocks, with her thin arms buried deep in a basin of soapy water. Her fingers were cracked and raw. Her dress was torn badly at the shoulder. Her ribs were visible through the fabric. She looked like a child who had not been properly fed in a very long time. Mr. Okoro stopped walking. He stood there for a moment, watching her, and then he asked a question nobody in Obiagu had ever thought to ask. "Why are you not in school?" Amina looked up at him with confused, almost frightened eyes. She told him she did not go to school. She said Mama Chinyera had told her a long time ago that school was not for children like her, and she had believed it ever since. Mr. Okoro did not argue with her that morning. He just nodded quietly and walked on to the school. But the very next day, he came back to the river carrying a small reading book wrapped carefully in brown paper. He knelt beside Amina and handed it to her, and then he told her something she had never heard from any human being in her entire life. He said, "Every child in this world deserves a chance to learn, and that includes you." Amina took the book with trembling hands. She held it like it was the most valuable thing she had ever touched. That evening, after all her chores were done and the compound had gone quiet, she crept behind the kitchen wall where nobody could see her, and she opened the book under the moonlight. She could not understand most of the words, but she traced each one with her sore finger and whispered them into the darkness. And for the first time in her short, painful life, something inside Amina's chest stirred. Something small, but warm. Something that felt like it might be hope. For 2 beautiful weeks, Amina lived a secret life. She hid the book inside a plastic bag and tucked it under a pile of heavy stones near the river where nobody would think to look. Every evening after her work was done, she would sneak out to the big mango tree by the water and sit with her back against the trunk, reading by whatever light the sky offered. Mr. Okoro came by some evenings and sat beside her, helping her sound out the difficult words, correcting her gently, encouraging her quietly. He never raised his voice. He never grew impatient. He told her she was smart, and she believed him, because in her whole life, nobody had ever said something kind to her without wanting something in return. But Amina made one terrible mistake during those 2 weeks. She smiled too much. She walked a little taller. She carried a brightness in her eyes that had not been there before. And in a house like Mama Chinyere's, any sign of happiness in the orphan was treated as a threat. Zainab noticed it first. She watched Amina for days, then one evening followed her to the river. She found Amina under the mango tree with the book open on her lap, lips moving softly. Zainab snatched the book and ran back to the compound, screaming for her mother. The look on Mama Chinyere's face when she saw that book was something Amina would never forget. She did not shout. She did not raise her hand. She walked slowly to the cooking fire, held the book over the flames, and let it burn while Amina watched. The pages curled and blackened. The words Amina had been learning disappeared into ash. Mama Chinyere turned to Amina with flat, cold eyes and said, "If I ever catch you pretending to be something you are not, I will send you to a place where no one will ever find you." That night, Amina lay on the cold floor of the storage room, staring at the ceiling, and she wondered if she would ever be allowed to feel hope again. But Mama Chinyere was not finished. She needed to make sure no one else in Obiagu would try to help the girl. The next morning, she marched to the village council hall and told the elders that Mr. Okoro had been sneaking into her compound, disturbing her household, and trying to undermine her authority over a child she had generously taken in. She said the man was putting dangerous ideas into the orphan's head. Chief Udo, the village chairman, was a heavy-set man who enjoyed three things in life: his food, his title, and his power over other people's problems. He summoned Mr. Okoro to his compound that same afternoon and warned him in front of every seated elder, "Stay away from that girl, or I will personally make sure you lose your teaching post and your name in this village." Mr. Okoro stood there and looked around the room at every face. Not one elder disagreed with Chief Udo. Not one of them asked a single question about Amina's well-being. Mr. Okoro left the room without saying a word, but his jaw was clenched tight and his eyes were burning with a quiet fire that nobody in that room understood. He did not give up on Amina that day. He just stopped being loud about it. With the book destroyed and Mr. Okoro publicly silenced, Mama Chinyere tightened her grip on Amina's life. She added 3 more households to the washing route, bringing the total to more than a dozen families. She announced a new rule. Amina would not eat until every last piece of laundry was scrubbed, dried, folded, and returned. Some days Amina did not eat until 10 at night. Some days she did not eat at all. Her body grew thinner and her eyes grew duller. And then Mama Chinyere arranged something worse. She sent Amina to work inside the compound of Chief Udo himself. The chief's wife, Mama Udo, was a woman with a tongue sharper than a razor and a heart colder than well water. She made Amina eat whatever scraps she was given from a dented plate on the bare ground outside the kitchen, the same spot where the family's dogs were fed. Amina would kneel there in the dirt, eating with her fingers, while through the window she could see Chief Udo's children sitting at the dining table with proper plates and napkins. Mama Udo sometimes stood at that window watching, and she never once looked away with shame. One evening, while sweeping the dusty storage room at the back of Chief Udo's compound, Amina's broom caught on something wedged between the wall and an old wooden shelf. She pulled it out and found a small necklace made of dark wooden beads strung on a thin leather cord. It had clearly been there for a very long time. The leather was stiff, and the beads were covered in dust. Amina almost tossed it into the rubbish pile, but then she turned it over and noticed something carved into the flat wooden pendant at the center of the cord. The letters read, Dr. E. Mensa. She had no idea what the name meant. She had no idea who this person was or why their necklace was hidden behind a shelf in Chief Udo's storage room. But the necklace felt important somehow. It felt like it belonged to someone who mattered, someone real, someone whose story was not finished. She slipped it quietly into the pocket of her torn dress and kept it pressed close to her body for the rest of the night. For 3 days, Amina carried the necklace everywhere, hidden deep in her pocket. At night, she would hold it in her palm and trace the carved letters with her thumb. It gave her comfort she could not explain. But one careless afternoon, Zainab bumped into her and noticed Amina adjusting something under her dress. Before Amina could react, Zainab shoved her hand into the pocket and pulled the necklace out. She read the inscription and her eyes went wide. She ran straight to Mama Chinyere. What happened next told Amina everything. Mama Chinyere did not simply take the necklace, she panicked. Her hands shook. Her voice cracked. She grabbed Amina by both arms, yanked her inside, and slapped her hard enough to make her ear ring for an hour. She demanded to know where Amina had found it. And then she leaned close and whispered something that sank into the girl's bones. "If you ever speak about this to anyone, I will make sure you disappear from this earth, and nobody will even notice you are gone." That same night, after the compound had gone quiet, Mama Chinyere slipped out through the back gate. Amina watched her from behind the kitchen wall as she walked quickly and nervously toward Chief Udo's house at the far end of the road. Through the partially open window of the chief's parlor, Amina could hear raised voices, sharp, angry, frightened, but she could not make out the exact words. Whatever that necklace meant, it had shaken both of them to their core. When Mama Chinyere finally came back, her face was tight, her eyes were red and swollen, and she walked past Amina without even looking at her. She went straight into her room and locked the door behind her. From that night forward, something fundamental shifted inside the compound. Mama Chinyere still treated Amina with cruelty, but now there was something else underneath it. Fear. Real, visible fear. She watched Amina the way a person watches a locked box they know contains something dangerous. And that told Amina one important thing. Whatever secret that wooden necklace carried, it was powerful enough to make a grown woman terrified of a 10-year-old child who owned nothing in this world. The days that followed were strange and tense. Mama Chinyere began locking Amina inside the back room much earlier in the evenings. She stopped sending her to certain houses on the washing route. She told Amina she was no longer allowed to go near the market or speak to anyone she did not already know. Amina could feel the walls of her life closing in tighter than ever before. But the cruelty did not stop. It only changed its shape. Instead of public humiliation, the punishments became private and more vicious. Mama Chinyere pressed the back of a hot cooking spoon against Amina's forearm for dropping a plastic cup. She locked the girl out of the compound during a heavy rainstorm and told her to sleep under the mango tree until morning. She cut Amina's food down to one small meal a day and said if the girl complained, she would get nothing at all. And Zainab, sensing her mother's new fear of the orphan but not understanding the reason behind it, became even more aggressive, as if determined to prove to everyone, including herself, that Amina was still beneath her. One morning, Mama Chinyere dragged Amina to the village market and told her to carry a heavy sack of yams on her head for a trader named Mama Nkechi. The sack weighed at least 20 kilograms, and Amina had barely eaten since the night before. Halfway across the market, her legs buckled, and one yam fell out and cracked open on the ground. Mama Nkechi screamed at her in front of everyone. She called her useless, brainless, a burden to the village. She said Amina's mother must have been a criminal to leave behind such a worthless child. Amina stood still in the center of that market with the broken yam at her feet and dozens of eyes on her. She did not cry. She had learned that crying only made things worse. but her hands were trembling and her chest felt tight. And the only thing in her mind was that wooden necklace, and the name carved on it that had made Mama Cheniere shake with fear. And then, on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, the black SUV appeared. It came slowly down the unpaved road that led into Obiagu, raising a thin cloud of red dust behind it. The vehicle was spotless, dark, and polished to a shine, a thing that clearly did not belong in a village like this. People stopped what they were doing and stared openly. Women at the market put down their trays. Men leaned against shop walls and watched. Children abandoned their games and ran alongside the vehicle, slapping its doors and laughing. The SUV parked near the village square, and a tall man in a well-fitted dark suit stepped out carrying a brown leather folder under his arm. His name was Mr. Bassett. He was calm, composed, and he spoke with the quiet authority of someone who was used to being listened to. He walked into the village square and began asking questions in a polite but firm voice. He was looking for a child, a girl who would be approximately 10 years old. A girl whose mother had come to this village many years ago and had never left. He said he had been sent by a man of authority in Abuja, and he made it clear the matter was extremely urgent. News of the well-dressed stranger and his government vehicle spread through Obiagu faster than fire through dry Harmattan grass. Within the hour, Mama Cheniere had heard every detail. The SUV, the suit, the questions about a girl. Her face drained of color. She moved quickly and without hesitation. She grabbed Amina from the kitchen where the girl was scrubbing pots, dragged her down the corridor by the wrist, shoved her into the back room, and locked the heavy metal door. She leaned close to the door and hissed, "If you make one single sound, you will regret it for the rest of your miserable life." Then she rushed across the village to Chief Udo's compound. They sat together in his parlor with every curtain drawn tight and the front door bolted. And there, behind those closed doors, the full, ugly truth finally came into the light. Chief Udo paced the room and said the words out loud for the first time in 10 years. "That girl's father is still alive. He is a rich and powerful man. And if this government person finds her here, everything we have built will be destroyed." Here is what really happened 10 years ago. The story that Mama Cheniere and Chief Udo had spent a decade burying. Amina's mother was not a nameless, homeless stranger who wandered into Obiagu from nowhere. Her name was Nkeru, and she was the young and beautiful wife of Dr. Emmanuel Mensah, a respected, wealthy, and highly connected government doctor based in Abuja. Nkeru had fled to Obiagu during a difficult and dangerous pregnancy because she was running from the threats of her husband's jealous older brother, a man named Uche, who wanted to seize Dr. Mensah's family inheritance and believed that a child, an heir, would permanently block his claim. Nkeru chose Obiagu because her late aunt had once lived there, and she believed the village would be safe. She carried with her two things of enormous value: a wooden bead necklace that was a personal gift from her husband, and a leather bag containing land deeds, property titles, and bank documents worth more than every building, farm, and shop in Obiagu combined. She placed her trust in the village, and the village betrayed her. When Nkeru died that night in the clinic, Chief Udo was the first person to arrive at the scene. He went through her belongings while her body was still warm and immediately understood the value of what she had been carrying. He contacted Mama Cheniere, a woman he had known for years, a woman he trusted to be discreet and to do whatever needed to be done for the right price, and together they made a decision that would poison both their lives for the next decade. They took the documents. They took the necklace. They hid everything. And then they sent word to Abuja through a message carrier that both the mother and the child had died during the birth. Dr. Emmanuel Mensah received that message, and it broke him. He buried his grief in years of work and silence. But something inside him never accepted it. Something never felt settled. Years later, he hired a private investigator, and after months of searching, that investigator found a single fragile thread, a handwritten record at the Obiagu village clinic, showing that a baby girl had been delivered alive and healthy on the same night Nkiru died. That one piece of paper changed everything. That record led Dr. Mensah to Mr. Bassi, and Mr. Bassi led straight to Obiagu. But Mama Chinyere and Chief Udo had no intention of letting the truth walk freely into the open. When Mr. Bassett began asking questions around the village, Mama Chinyere was already 3 steps ahead. She spread a lie through the market within minutes. She told everyone that the washing girl had run away 2 nights ago. She said the ungrateful child had stolen money from her purse and disappeared into the bush. She even squeezed tears from her eyes in front of the elders, calling herself a victim of her own generosity. Chief Udo backed her story without blinking. He told Mr. Basit directly that no girl matching the description he gave existed in Obiagu anymore. Mr. Basit listened to every word. He wrote careful notes in his leather folder, and he said very little in return. But before he left the village that evening, he made one quiet stop. He walked to the primary school, found Mr. Okoro sitting at his desk marking papers, and placed a white business card on the table. He said, "If you hear anything about a 10-year-old girl in this village, call this number immediately." Mr. Okoro picked up the card, looked at it for a long moment, and then placed it inside his shirt pocket, right over his heart. That very night, behind the locked door of Chief Udo's parlor, Mama Chinyere made a decision that showed just how far she was willing to go to protect herself. She told Chief Udo they had to remove Amina from the village permanently and quickly, before the stranger returned with more questions. She had a distant relative in Benue State, a woman who ran a small cassava farm and always needed cheap workers. Mama Chinyere's plan was simple. Put Amina on a transport before sunrise, send her deep into rural Benue, and let her vanish into a life of farm work so far from Obiagu that no one would ever think to connect her with the name Mensah. Chief Udo agreed without hesitation. He handed Mama Chinyere cash for the vehicle fare and told her to make certain the girl was gone before the first rooster crowed. When Mama Chinyere returned to her compound that night, she packed a small torn bag with 2 of Amina's old dresses and told Zainab to sit outside the storage room door and make absolutely sure the girl did not make a sound or try to leave. But Mr. Okoro had been watching. Not just today. He had been watching for weeks. Long before the black SUV ever rolled into Obiagu, he had seen how Amina was treated. He had watched her kneel at that river until her fingers bled. He had watched her carry loads that grown men would struggle with. He had seen the bruises on her arms that she tried to hide under her torn sleeves. And now, the day the government man arrived, he had watched Mama Chinyere drag Amina into the house just hours before she stood in the village square, weeping and telling everyone the child had run away. He knew it was a lie. That night, long after the last lamp in Obiagu had flickered out, Mr. Okoro moved silently through the dark paths of the village until he reached the back of Mama Chinyere's compound. He found the small barred window of the storage room and tapped very softly against the metal. A moment passed. Then Amina's thin face appeared in the darkness behind the bars, her eyes swollen from hours of crying. Mr. Okoro whispered her name and told her two things. Do not be afraid, and this time, the help that is coming is real. Mr. Okoro pulled the white business card from his shirt pocket and dialed the number in the darkness behind Mama Chinyere's compound. Mr. Bassi answered on the second ring. Mr. Okoro spoke quickly but clearly. The girl is alive. She is locked in a room in this compound, and they are planning to send her away before morning. There was a long, heavy pause on the other end of the phone. Then Mr. Bassett's voice came back, steady and firm. Do not let them move that child. Stay where you are. I will be there before dawn. And then he said something else, something that made Mr. Okoro's entire body go still. He said, The girl's father is already with me. He has been waiting 10 years for exactly this phone call. The black SUV returned to Obiagu before the first light of morning touched the treetops. But this time, it did not come alone. Behind it was a silver car with tinted windows. Mr. Bassett stepped out first and spoke quietly with two uniformed police officers who had traveled with him. Then the door of the silver car opened, and a man stepped into the cool, pre-dawn air. He wore a simple white shirt and dark trousers. He was tall, with gray showing at his temples. His face carried the kind of weight that only years of grief and unanswered prayers can place on a person. His name was Dr. Emmanuel Mensah. He had not slept. He had driven through the night from Abuja with nothing but a photograph of his late wife in his pocket and a prayer he had been whispering for 10 years. When Mr. Okoro led him to the back of Mama Chinyere's compound and pointed at the locked storage room, the doctor's hands began to tremble so badly he had to press them against his legs to steady himself. Mr. Bassett knocked firmly on Mama Chinyere's front door. When she opened it and saw him standing there with two police officers behind him, her legs gave way. She dropped to her knees in the doorway, her mouth opening and closing with no sound. Chief Udo came running from across the village when he heard the vehicles. He tried to explain, to deny, to push the blame onto anyone else. But Mr. Bassett raised one hand to silence him and held up a brown envelope. He said, "We found the stolen land documents in your house, Chief. We found the bank papers. We found everything you took from this child's mother the night she died." The officers walked past them to the back room and broke the padlock with a single strike. The door swung open, and there, sitting on the bare floor in the corner with her knees pulled to her chest and her eyes wide with fear, was Amina. She did not know what was happening. She did not recognize any of these faces. All she knew was that the door that had kept her in darkness had finally been opened. And then a man she had never seen before walked slowly into that room. Dr. Emmanuel Mensah crossed the small space and knelt down in front of Amina, bringing his face level with hers. His eyes were full of tears he had been holding for a decade. He reached inside his shirt and pulled out a wooden bead necklace with a flat carved pendant, identical in every way to the one Amina had found in Chief Udo's storage room. He held it out with shaking hands and said, "Your mother gave me this the day she left for Obiagu. I have worn it every single day since, waiting for the moment I would find you." Amina stared at the necklace, then slowly raised her eyes to his face. She did not understand everything yet, but something deep inside her, something older than memory, older than language, older than all the pain she had carried, recognized this man. Her small, cracked hands reached out, trembling, and her fingers touched the wooden pendant. And then, for the first time in 10 years, somebody wrapped their arms around that child and held her and did not let go. The justice came swiftly and completely. Chief Udo was arrested that morning and charged with fraud, theft of legal documents, and conspiracy to conceal a child's identity. Mama Chinyere was handcuffed in her own doorway and charged with child abuse, forced labor, and criminal conspiracy. The stolen land deeds and bank documents were recovered from Chief Udo's house and returned to Dr. Mensah's legal team. The village elders, those dignified men who had watched a little girl be broken for 10 years without lifting a finger, were named publicly in a regional newspaper. Their silence became their verdict. And Zainab, the girl who had dragged clean dresses through the mud just to watch Amina wash them again, stood alone in the empty compound as the police vehicles drove away. She watched through the gate as Amina climbed into the back seat of her father's silver car. Amina did not turn around. She did not look back. The compound that had been her prison for 10 years was already getting smaller in the mirror, and it would never hold her again. Dr. Mensah drove his daughter home to Abuja. When Amina walked through the front door, she stepped onto clean, polished tile floors for the first time in her life. There were soft chairs in the living room and a kitchen with a full refrigerator. Down the hallway was a bedroom with her name written on the door in blue paint. Amina. Dr. Mensah had prepared it months earlier, from the moment the investigator told him there was a chance his daughter might still be alive. There were books on the shelf, dresses in the closet, still with their tags. A small desk beside the window where the morning sunlight came through, warm and golden. 1 week later, Mr. Okoro received a phone call. Dr. Mensah offered him a teaching position at one of the finest schools in Abuja. His way of honoring the only person in Obiagu who had protected his daughter when the rest of the world looked away. Mr. Okoro accepted. Not for the salary. He accepted because he wanted to be there the day Amina walked through the doors of a real school for the very first time. On her very first night in Abuja, Amina sat at the dining table across from her father. The table was set with clean plates and glasses and warm food she had never tasted before. She sat in a proper chair, not on the bare ground, not outside the kitchen door, not beside the dogs. She sat at the table like a person who belonged there, because she did. Dr. Mensah reached across and placed something gently in her open palm. It was the wooden bead necklace, both halves now joined together on a single cord, reunited for the first time since the night her mother left for Obiagu. Amina closed her fingers around the pendant and held it against her chest. She closed her eyes. The house was still. The city hummed softly beyond the curtains. And when she finally opened her eyes and looked at her father in the golden lamplight, she said just 4 quiet words. "Is this really real?" Dr. Mensah smiled. His voice, for the first time in 10 years, was steady and sure. He said, "It has always been real, Amina. They just hid it from you." And in that moment, sitting at that table, wearing that necklace, holding her father's hand, Amina understood something that 10 years of cruelty had never been able to destroy. She was not what they told her she was. She had never been what they told her she was. She was loved. She was wanted. And she was home.